Manchester United. They've announced a deal for £60 million a year with Snapdragon, the front of shirt sponsor. What are your thoughts on that deal and how significant is that for the club?
Well, I went into the Snapdragon deal in a bit more detail and did a lot of looking at it. And it's reminiscent to me of they had one with Team Viewer, I think, was one of the front of shirt sponsors as well. And that sort of fell through because it wasn't a great, well, it was a product that was secondary, if you like, in terms of using. And Snapdragon, as I understand it, is all about processors and isn't, if you like, a frontline consumer product. And I'm always a little bit confused as to why those sort of companies need that brand recognition on the football shirt. And I get the numbers can work sometimes, but it just seems a strange way to do it when I really believe consumer-facing companies can get much more value out of front of shirt sponsorships. 60 million to me seemed a low number for Manchester United, given the supposedly 1.1 billion fans around the world. But then again, I know there's turmoil in the United social media team after Radcliffe had said, look, everybody can no longer work from home. I know that they've lost some of the good talent there. And they've never been very good at the social media side of things at United. And so, I hope that Snapdragon can find a way to maximize it. I know they'll be looking at just impressions, which, of course, shirts can deliver. But I think shirts can be so much more valuable to companies if it's not just about impressions, it's also about converting into sales. And I just wonder how good the data is on the fan base of the supposed 1.1 billion and how well companies can connect to it. So that's what brings me a question as to why they didn't get a better deal with the shirt. Also, I see the Snapdragon sponsorship person talking about wanting to bring the Premier League games overseas. And that was interesting to see. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's prompted as well by some way in the Radcliffe regime, because they've been talking about having more say in the Premier League and wanting to have more decisions on things like taking the games overseas is exactly the sort of thing he's talking about. So Snapdragon, interesting. They've got feet in sport already with Formula One. They've also done a couple of stadium deals, and that's another interesting thing that they may be looking at Old Trafford for naming rights. It's something they seem to have enjoyed before. It's watch this space really and see how it develops. But as I say, for a company that basically is around processors, it does seem a strange fit. Although it meets their requirement, I don't think it's the right fit in some way, and it's not really a big number.
What would be a big number then, Keith? Where would you value that deal to be a success potentially for Manchester United?
I think it's worth 100 million to some company, certainly, that can use the impressions, as I say, and then convert it into revenue and sales. And that would take good data use and good monetizing of that database. But nevertheless, it's there to be done. And that's the companies I think that I would have been focusing on. But it may be that United's sales pitch means that they cannot offer that data usage enough right now to be able to make those things happen. But it should be worth 100 million to somebody to be able to reach that number of people, and with the exposure and the impressions it offers as well, that should be worth that sort of level. If you look at what comparing it to the Super Bowl, I think if you looked at the numbers and the costs for Super Bowl ads, for instance, compared to what the United shirt offers for the whole season, it's so cheap at 60 million. And so it's something that needs to be, the team there need to be looked at. What's also interesting, as I understand it, is that the person that brought in the Snapdragon deal is leaving United as part of the changes. I don't know if that's forced or whether she's upset with the new regime, but it's interesting that their best success at the moment, and she's going straight away.
Keith, they also announced that they're going to be looking at sort of upgrading the Wi-Fi potentially at Old Trafford and Carrington as well to sort of improve the fan experience at the ground, but also general operations day-to-day for the players too. What are your thoughts? And do you think that sort of goes hand in hand with this deal potentially, given the processing element as you've discussed?
Yeah, I saw that and I thought to myself, well, maybe that increases the value if they're doing all that sort of work as an additional cost. But then again, it may also be the other way around, that Man United may have to pay for that as well. So if that's the case, then the value is even less. But I don't know if it's an add-on. I think they would have mentioned it if that was an add-on to the contract. So there may well be money changing hands from United. We'll have to wait and see. But certainly Wi-Fi is crucial in stadia these days. We all know, as the handheld sets and the third screen, as people call them, are needed. Fans turn to them. Nearly every fan's got one, and they want instant replays. They want to look at the score results and everything else. It's crucial that Wi-Fi services are there, and United have been dragging, as we know, for a long time. And also at Carrington, I'm sure all those players need to get onto their agents as quickly as possible about different deals. So they need to have their Wi-Fi ready for them as well.
Keith, we look at some on-field news. There was some talk actually that the club have reportedly hired a lawyer to potentially try and unblock their Jean-Claire Todibo move, which we discussed in previous weeks. What are your thoughts around that, and how likely are they to succeed potentially with this?
It's strange they've gone legal on this one so quickly against UEFA. I don't think they're going to have much success with this. It's obvious that Radcliffe is upset with this because he's got the dual ownership issue, and he seems to be fighting a lot of battles on a lot of different fronts again, as I've mentioned before. This is just one more that I'm surprised he decided to pick a fight with. I'd have thought there'd been bigger things to fight UEFA on, but I certainly don't think he's got much hope of success with this, unless there's some extenuating circumstance that goes beyond the rules. But I don't see it, and at the moment, until there's greater detail comes out, I think they're losing position there.
And Keith, as you mentioned there, Sir Jim Ratcliffe looking at lots of different avenues and options to potentially expand revenue and growth, as we've discussed in previous podcast episodes. There've been some talk, actually, they've held major financial institutions. There's been some talk, Keith, that they've spoken with major financial institutions about ways to fund the new stadium potentially. Do you think the club would do that potentially? Are Ineos likely to take on the debt? How would that then work potentially?
Well, before we get onto the stadium, which I'm happy to go through where I think it stands in terms of financing, you're right. I mean, there's Radcliffe talking about different revenue streams and trying to grow them. But I've got to say, the Glazers, for all their shortcomings from many fans' point of view, have been absolutely superb at growing revenues over the last 10 years or so. And that's the one thing that nobody can say against them, that they've done a really great job on increasing commercial revenues. And so, I don't know why Radcliffe would have to get involved in that when, don't fix something that isn't broke. Now, on the stadium, it's interesting. I think there'll be a queue of potential lenders, private equity banks, etc., that would be looking to help finance that stadium. United are a rock solid investment for them in that area. They'll be able to securitize, give security against any particular debt they would need. I think they'll be looking at around about £1 billion, depending on what plan they're going to be doing. But that should be able to be achieved quite easily in the other markets, given the credibility of Radcliffe, the Glazers, and the Man United revenue streams. So I don't foresee a problem. I don't think there'll be guarantees necessarily have to be given by Radcliffe and Ineos. I think it would probably be against the club itself and its revenues. They've got a lot of assets, and so I don't see a problem for them finding finance for the stadium. And I think there probably will be a queue, as I say, waiting to work with them to do that. So that won't be an issue, as it is with many other clubs.
And Keith, does that mean upgrading Old Trafford potentially, do you think? Or do you think they will be looking down the new avenue potentially of moving those 500 yards to a different place and moving out of Old Trafford potentially?
Well, that's all in Seb Coe's committee. I haven't had any smoke signals coming out of that committee room yet as to which way they're going. My gut feeling is they're going to stay with Old Trafford and they're going to try and fix it up. I think they may be missing a trick by not putting in, you're seeing what's happening with Real Madrid right now in terms of that stadium. That's becoming where United need to be. And I think tinkering with Old Trafford, although it's got great history, we understand that. I think United, if they want to really retake first place, as Jim Radcliffe has been talking about, he's got to put something really special in the ground and get people around the globe buzzing about, Man United again for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And a revised Old Trafford, I don't think is necessarily going to do that.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.